welcome everybody. This is Cody Buchanan, head coach of Guerrilla Wrestling Club, and what we've got going on today, or probably throughout the next couple of weeks, we're just going to shine a little light on our outgoing seniors from our club this week. So this is a time to kind of catch up with them, talk a little bit about their experience in the sport of wrestling, and kind of where they're going from here. And our club is pretty eclectic. We have a lot of different avenues and pathways that athletes are going in, but this gives us an opportunity to give them a little light, especially as with all the coronavirus stuff going on, they don't necessarily get this right now. As an educator and coach, we're all kind of on the sidelines. As an educator, obviously we're doing distance learning, but it's not the same. And as these students are going to find out, their experience in the spring of their senior year is going to be different than everybody else. So our first guest of our little, we're going to come up with a good name for this. This is the first trial. But our first guest of our senior outgoing interviews is Owen Pharo, Rochester Century, finished at 160 pounds this year for Century. He is a two-time entrant, one-time section champ. He's a Minnesota USA Storm freestyle cadet team member on the Fargo team. And a whole lot of other things that we'll get to in a little bit here, but I guess I'll throw it over to Owen. Owen, how you doing today?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. What is quarantine life and training like for you right now?
Quarantine life, kind of on its own is a lot of schoolwork, and just kind of free time sitting around the house, maybe getting outside and doing some stuff. But training wise, it's been kind of hard with, kind of limited space at the house and limited equipment, but I've been running quite a bit and doing kind of body weight exercises and stuff like that.
That was the correct answer to make, not telling me you were sitting around all the time. I was talking to Owen before this, and now we're probably, I don't know, we've been on for about 10 minutes, and not at all yet has he complimented me on the fact that I trimmed my beard or that I got a haircut. Owen, scale 1 to 10, how much greater does it look?
I haven't seen the hair though. You have to show the hair. Yeah. Oh, okay. It does look really nice. I like the cut, but I think I'm probably a bigger fan of the long hair.
Of the long hair? I tell you what, I felt lighter in the head after getting rid of all that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about getting started in wrestling. What is your first memory of being in wrestling? Where did you enter the sport, and when did you enter the sport?
For folk style, I entered the sport. Would have been kindergarten. I remember getting a call from my grandpa because we had a little landline at the house. I got a phone call on it, and I picked it up. And it was my grandpa calling, and he said, "Hey, Owen, what do you think about joining wrestling?" Like 5-6-year-old me at the time was like, "Yeah, that sounds awesome," not knowing at all what it is. And then I got real excited. Went and grabbed my mom. She talked to my grandpa a little more about it, and then from there, we actually started going to Pine Island for practices because Rochester didn't have a youth club at the time. So that's where I started off my first year wrestling, was over in Pine Island. So,
well, and your grandparents live in Orinoco, right?
Yep.
So that makes sense too. It's a little closer that way. And that might have been when Rochester was all one club, huh? Because I think they split it up between the 3 schools, but when you were in kindergarten, I don't know if they would have done that yet.
Yeah, I don't think so, because I think the only chance for me to wrestle youth was or the closest for me to wrestle youth would have been kind of Pine Island for the situation we're in. So yeah.
Little history lesson on youth clubs here in Southeast Minnesota. And it's interesting the way you brought that up. You talked about your grandparents, you talked about your family. Real quick, shout out to all of Owen's family, grandma, grandpa, brothers, sisters, mom, dad, everybody, super helpful in everything. And really have gotten, I mean, I'm sure they're super helpful for you as a
Yeah.
coach. They've been super helpful for me. Um, Always want to talk, always want to chat. They're super involved. I mean, without letting you give them all the credit, they've given Owen a lot of opportunities and therefore given me a lot of opportunities. But always willing to pitch in, work at a table, do whatever. I mean, they are a wrestling family.
I may be the only wrestler in there, but they they took a hold of that pretty quick.
They
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
So kind of looking at the span of your entire wrestling career thus far, which we'll get to later, who are some people that you kind of look up to or learn from in the sport of wrestling?
So I remember kind of it was for when I was growing up through youth, like probably middle to end of youth. I was a huge fan of Zach Sanders because that's when he was kind of real big at the U of M and everything. So I remember I was a real big fan of him, but still not knowing a whole ton about the sport at the time. And then as he kind of graduated and I moved up, then I got a little more involved in freestyle and Greco and stuff like that. And more of my idols are people I look up to in that are still wrestling, kind of turned into like Jordan Burroughs and then like big names like that. Some people kind of overseas like guy from Japan and people like them. And then recently, it's a lot of like kind of people still in college, Spencer Lee, Yanni, people like that. Kind of big names in the sport right now. So those are kind of like my idols and what I kind of look up to right now as a wrestler.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so thinking back to when you first got kind of involved with my club at Gorilla Wrestling Club, you must have been 7th or 8th grade,
Right around there,
like
yeah,
when you
kind of,
first started coming around during freestyle
yeah,
season.
yeah. Because I was probably a year or two after I started high school, so yeah, yep.
Yes, and you came in. You had to come in with Larson.
I went, yeah, yep, sure
Yep.
did,
So you
yeah.
started tagging along with him,
Hmm.
and Owen coming in as a 7th or 8th grader. Um, what would you think my first impression of you was?
Man, this guy is something else. I don't know how.
Loud
Yeah.
clothing.
Oh yeah, the clothing
I
especially.
mean, as many neon colors as you can fit below your kneecaps. The
No,
long
below the waist.
socks. Yeah, the long socks and the neon colored shoes. And I was like, what is going on with this kid?
This guy is a baller.
And it was right at the same time, as I said earlier, that like Jared, like Steve was bringing Jared down because Jared couldn't drive yet, Larson.
Hmm.
And you started coming around. Then looking kind of as you've come through, right, grown quite a bit. I mean, you're
Yeah.
not still short and kind of pudgy, which is
Hmm.
ironic, me calling you pudgy as an 8th grader. Um, but I think one of the things I see most as far as growth for you is just kind of how you lead people. Um, it's no Anybody who's been in our room would know Brody led warmups.
Yeah.
That was what he did, especially because kind of our home base is in Stewartville. Brody Olson did the warmups. Why? Because he could do most of the tumbling. He could explain
Yeah.
most of the tumbling. He
Hmm.
knew how I was feeling. So if I came in with like a poor attitude or a stupid look on my face, he knew what we had to do to get warmed up. And one of the things I like about this year is that you kind of jumped into that role more.
Yeah.
So that's been really fun to see because it's one thing to become a leader in your high school room
Hmm.
because you know all those kids, you may have grown up with them, you know the coaches really well. But for people who aren't aware, like our club is from kids all over Southeast Minnesota.
Yep.
So whereas Owen was one of 3 studs in his high school room and the only kid up until this year that had any state tournament experience, you come into our room and you have kids that are state place winners, state champions, kids
Hmm.
coming back from college, etc. Excuse me, and to step up and say, "Hey, I'm gonna run the warm up." Maybe even sometimes when you didn't want to, but everybody else just didn't make a sound
Yeah.
until I got agitated. You
Yeah.
jumped into that role, so that's something I really liked out of it.
Hmm.
Where again, as we're crossing the timeline of your career, when did you kind of have your first like oh man, I'm kind of getting this? When was that point for you? I have a firm belief that every wrestler has a point where they go, I could be pretty good at this. I'm gonna start taking this seriously. When was that point for you?
I think that point for me was probably end of my sophomore year. Because I really kind of like, I don't really know what happened in the sophomore year. It was like I don't really remember kind of where my mindset was at, but I just remember my body was feeling real good, and I was wrestling probably the best I've ever wrestled at the time. And that was when I ended up getting my first state entrant ticket. So
Yep.
um, I think that was probably my turning point, and especially at the section tournament. I mean, I lost my first match, and you lose your first match at the section, you're already thinking, well, this is kind of it for the season. And then, surprisingly enough, I wrestled all the way back to true second, and took second place there with 5 consecutive wins there at the section tournament. So I think that is, when I think of a turning point for me, I think that is kind of the year. That's the time period, is that year. And then after that, it really kind of kept going up. So.
And it's funny you bring. I mean, obviously that year when a kid first makes a state tournament, that's usually a sign for a lot of kids. Like, hey, I could be pretty good at this. I want to try to place the state tournament now. You get the, the deer out of the headlights. And I figured that that's what you'd choose. And I'm gonna rewind it back about 3 weeks before that tournament to the Rochester Century invite as a sophomore, Owen.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember how that day went?
Kind of. It's not like
I
I
do.
remember
It
a
was
little
4
bit.
losses in a 5-man round robin.
Yeah,
I
it
remember
wasn't.
a pretty hurting unit, Owen Pharo, underneath those bleachers at Century High School.
Yeah, it
Um,
was. Yeah, not the
but the
best time.
reason I see that as a breakthrough was because you kind of had finally hit that point where, like, nobody likes losing. Like, nobody steps on the mat and goes, "Oh, I'm really stoked to lose today."
Yeah.
But it takes a different kind of athlete to want to do something about it. And I think that that was the first point. And again, I had known you, 7th or 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
We get about halfway through your career up through high school as a 10th grader, and you had finally hit the point where you're like, "Okay, we got to change some things about this."
Yeah.
And as a coach, like, that's like the exciting part. That's what you want out of athletes, and it takes kids different times.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't think I'm being rude by saying prior to that time, wrestling was more of a social event for you.
I would definitely say through youth and beginning of high school, it definitely was. Yeah. Yeah.
And then that kind of helped turn the switch as to, hey, I could be a pretty darn good wrestler.
Yeah.
Um, so I knew, I didn't know that you were going to choose that, but I had a feeling you
Yeah.
would. And
Mm-hmm.
as I was looking back, I was like, man, I don't want to get this guy's accolades wrong. I
Yeah.
got back to that point, and then like the track wrestling thing right before the state tournament was
Uh-huh.
that tournament, and it says 5th, and I'm like, I don't remember him taking 5th. I remember us having a bad conversation underneath the bleachers.
Yeah.
So I clicked on it, and it showed that you went 0-4. And
Yeah,
I was like,
it was
now I
crappy.
remember. Yeah, that was not a
It
great
was,
day.
yeah. Yeah.
So what would be your favorite wrestling memory up to now?
Um, I think my favorite wrestling memory, kind of throughout all of high school or all of my wrestling career, would probably been most recently at the section tournament. Just winning my finals match, or not even winning my finals match. I would say winning my semifinals match against a kid from Owatonna. Lost to him previously in the season, and previously that past year too, when we butt heads at team sections. So kind of didn't do haven't been or done haven't done so well against him in the past, but beating him, especially beating him like 2-0, was a big deal for me, and that would probably be the biggest thing that sticks out of my head right now for kind of my favorite moment. Just because I had so much energy, and I kind of like controlled a lot of the match, even though there wasn't very many points scored. So yeah.
That's a recurring theme in some of your athletic endeavors.
Yeah, I know.
So we're gonna get to, like, this is what I'm gonna call the advice portion
Mhm.
of our interviews. What is a favorite piece of advice or like a life lesson that you've received from wrestling or around wrestling, that you kind of take with you as you exit the high school wrestling?
I think the biggest like advice I think I've ever, it wasn't like personally given to me, but I saw it I think off of either on Flow or something like that. And I'm pretty sure if I remember correctly, it was a little while ago. I think it was Jaden Cox. He said something about well, like he may have been better than you today, but tomorrow's still kind of, you don't know what tomorrow's gonna hold, you know. So he may be better than you today, but tomorrow it could be you. It all depends on how well you train and everything, how kind of your mindset is, all everything like that. So just because you lose to someone today doesn't mean that in the future you'll lose to them again. It just means it leaves you more opportunity to kind of step up. So
And boy, oh boy, is he the person to talk about that with that 97 kilo weight class between him and Snyder, and then trying to
yeah,
figure out
no,
who's going to get a chance at Sedge Alive, hopefully,
yeah.
knock on wood. Um, so now we know what advice you've given. What would you give as advice, first off, just to like somebody joining the sport, somebody brand new? I don't care if they're in high school, if they're in youth,
hmm
somebody that says, I want to be a wrestler. What kind of advice would you give them?
Um, put in the work. You know, don't kind of. It's like what DeSanto always says. I think I'm pretty sure he what he says is something that Brand says, that you get out what you put in. You know, so if especially for newer kids, I think it's a little better for them is because they have a lot more time to keep building it up. But for anyone in the sport of wrestling, new or old, just kind of the more you put in, the more you're gonna get out. It seems like so. That would be my advice to anyone, either joining the sport or just wanting advice in general from me. So, yeah.
And now to extend that, what kind of advice would you give to somebody who is just starting to take the sport kind of seriously, right? Like think to you,
hmm
10th grade Owen Pharo, even if it's not post state entrant or whatever, but like
hmm
somebody who's like, hey, I want to be good at this. What kind of advice would you give them?
I would say focus on your lost matches that you lost, not the matches you won. I mean, no one really cares unless it's a giant win. You know, something like you win a state title, things like that. But I would say every match, kind of win or lose, or sorry, I should say winning every single match or just matches in general aren't crazy of a big deal to me. It's the matches you lose. That's what you really, everyone says that's what you really learn from is when you lose. And I think that's a big deal because there's a lot to learn from matches, kind of mindset wise, preparing, what went right, what went wrong during that match, stuff like that. So that's what I would say is focus on the matches you lose. And if you don't lose matches, then focus on the things that you don't feel that strong in. So
If they ain't losing matches, Owen, I hate to break it to you, they probably ain't taking advice from you.
probably not, but I don't know.
um, so let's talk about the future. What are you doing? Where are you going? What's the plan?
Yeah, I'm going to University of Wisconsin Eau Claire this next year to wrestle there. Uh,
No, you're
uh,
going to study there. You happen to
yes,
also be
yes. Sorry,
wrestling.
sorry. I am going there. I'm going there for school,
What are
but
you studying?
I'm not really sure yet. Don't really know. Don't really have a major kind of in mind right now. Or sorry, I don't have like a picked out major, but I have some in mind. Like it's either biology or geology. One of those two is what I'm thinking right now, but it's still kind of uncertain. So,
So
yeah.
Eau Claire,
Yep.
undecided.
hmm
Um, when I was undecided when I went to college, my first like counselor person told me it's okay to be undecided because 50% of college kids change their major in the first 2 years anyway. And
That's
then
what I've been told.
I was still way behind and had to spend an extra semester there. Thank you. If you're watching, UWL counselor, I appreciate that extra semester of tuition. Eau Claire, kind of bouncing around some sciences, planning to wrestle. Any idea on a weight class?
Not really, because it kind of, from what I've seen from people coming in to Eau Claire, there's a lot of guys right around my weight, so I don't know how the weights are going to stack up. So I don't know if it's going to be one guy here and everyone's behind him, or if they're going to spread us out more. And it depends on what they have there right now too. So
And you might
I'm
grow
not
yet. You might still
I
hit a
still
two-week growth spurt, man. You
I
could jump
might
up 50 pounds.
or I might do a salto and just cut.
Let's not get crazy here. Although, so you wrestled 160 this year, could have made 52.
I think I definitely could have, but I think I was feeling a bit better at 60 just kind of naturally. But I think if I got down to 6 or 52 earlier in the season, then I would have gotten used to it and just probably felt faster there.
Only reason I point that out, Eric Tui graduated at 152 pounds, wrestled as a 197 as a senior.
Jeez.
It happens. You could
Yeah.
still grow. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have. Oh, I do have one. This is a curveball. I didn't even tell you about this, Owen. You ready?
Yeah.
You get to ask, and you're the first one, so nobody gets to ask you a random question. But
Sweet.
everybody after this is going to get to ask the next person a question.
Mm.
No, I'm not telling you who it is.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
you have
I can't
to
make it specific.
No, you can't. And as
Okay.
fun as it would be to personally attack one of them on here, we're gonna refrain from that.
Yeah.
But you get to ask the next senior one question. What would you ask them?
Does it have to be like any type of question?
It could be
Obviously,
anything, dude.
relatively like
Yeah, stay away from
keep it
favorite
within.
colors. Yeah, I don't
Okay,
care
yeah.
about icebreakers that you're gonna use at college next year.
Oh, ask the next person what their crappiest loss was, and then have them tell you in detail about
I'm gonna go with
it.
toughest loss.
Sorry. Yeah, that's probably more grammatically best.
Grammatically,
Never mind, not grammatically.
you've been distance learning too long, bro.
I have been. I don't even know if you call it distance learning. I think it just might be distance. Leave out the learning part. Because wow.
Yeah, as an educator, we're all battling it right now. Is there anybody you want to take time to thank? I'm going to give you the floor. You get the last words of this, which kills me as somebody who likes to dominate conversation.
Yeah.
Anybody you want to thank? Anything else you want to say?
I think just people I'd like to thank, obviously, like we said earlier, my family, kind of my biggest supporters, my practice partners, especially, Garrett Pavalco, Derek Lanke, everyone that's been in the practice room with me, kind of pushing me to how I got here and where I'm going. And yeah. Oh, and then obviously you, Cody, and a lot of my other coaches throughout
Yes.
throughout my journey so far. So yeah, big thanks to everyone that's helped me. So
speaking of Derek Meinke, I'm not going to let you get the last word. I lied. Do you know what the final record is between you two? The only thing that counts is if it's in a MSHSL sanctioned match.
Yeah. I think I'm up by one. I don't know exactly what the win-loss is, but I'm either we're tied or I'm up by one. I think. Because we haven't wrestled very often. We kind of like went around each other a little bit, I think.
You guys met twice this year. No, once.
Once this year. I beat him at Lake City.
Yeah, and then last year you guys wrestled twice.
Did we wrestle twice?
You wrestled. Did you wrestle him at
Lake City? I wrestled at Lake City, and then I wrestled. Where else would I have wrestled?
Northfield.
Oh yeah. So I think he is up. I think he's up by one. That's what it is.
Okay.
I think it's 2-1. That would make sense, unless there's one way in the past that I don't really remember. But
well, we're gonna find out because I am interviewing Derek Meinke next.
Oh, I was thinking that. I was going to make a specific question to him.
But we'll wrap this up. And again, told him he was gonna get the last word, and I lied. But really, really thankful for all the seniors in our program, especially, guys like Owen. There's a reason I chose to start with him. I don't pick favorites, but as somebody who I think has really jumped out as a leader this year, and he has a bit of personality that comes out at both strategic and non-strategic times, like when we're drilling and I need him to be quiet and work hard instead of chit-chatting. But thank you, Owen. You've done a lot, both for the program and for me as a human. We've grown kind of close, so I'm excited to see what you got going on at UW Eau Claire. I'm excited to see possibly other club mates joining you at Eau Claire and that, but I'll probably save that conversation for my next interview.
Yeah.
Um,
No spoilers. No spoilers.
no spoilers. So anything else? You do get the last word. I lied. We're
Okay.
just gonna take longer to get there.
I don't think I have anything else. No, nothing else.
Give the kid the last word, and he ain't got nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Owen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to everybody else who happens to be watching, thank you. Like I said, we're going to be doing this for a lot of our seniors, as many as I can get lined up. And then if all of our senior ones go well, then I'm hoping that we can get some alumni in to do a spotlight on what they're doing now and kind of talk about that. But for now, this is all we got. Thanks for watching.
Ain't nobody really gorilla.